Okay, so I'm a small hint late, but what's new? Resident Evil 5, it has been in the gaming news lately because if you played the game, you'd know black zombies, white protagonist, he's shooting them. Yeah, and IGN has posted a video and wrote an article, which is basically the video, about why that game can't be remade. It's literally called the Resident Evil game that can't be remade. Look, I want to watch the video, give my opinions. I decided to do that instead of the article. It's the same thing. But I'll say this before I watch the video, give my opinions. RE5 was okay. Best part of it was Seva and the DLC. And like Stella before she transformed. That's literally, it was Racing and Jill, but I didn't like what they did with her. But yeah, like I'm in no hurry for more Resident Evil 5, is what I'm saying, but not for the reasons I suspect he's gonna get into. So let's watch this video, get my opinions on it, because I remember when it came out. So it's like we're just revisiting the old controversies that have long been since been settled. But okay, first Popo, now this.
To remake the glory years of its survival horror series. With Resident Evil 4's release last year, Capcom's project to remake the glory years of its survival horror series is complete. But as the game's post-credit scene suggests,
No, it's not. Code Veronica X. Remake that. Then it was complete. Like we can have that conversation without Code Veronica X.
remakes aren't over, and so the big question is, where next? The obvious answer is a remake of Resident Evil 5, but on the game's 15th anniversary...
It's all brown. I get that the games back then were all brown. I spoke about this before. Literally when I was playing Resident Evil 4 remake. I didn't like the brown then, I don't like it now. If you remember that era, everything was brown in every game, and I found it annoying. I got tired of it real quick, so...
It's clear that moving forward chronologically will take Capcom's remakes into the series' weakest era, an era of gameplay and narrative decisions best left in the past. Resident Evil 5 simply can't be remade, at least not to the standards of Capcom's best work, and so the answer is not to remake, but to rewrite. Resident Evil is a survival horror series.
Yes.
Not that you'd know that playing Resident Evil 5. Sure, it features a constant flow of horrific imagery, but Resident Evil 5 is an action game through and through. That's evident in its cover shooter mechanics, vehicle chases with on-rails turret sequences, and the constant rattle of assault rifles. Even its visual design evokes the sandy shades of modern military games that experienced mass popularity in the late 2000s. It all speaks to a series that had lost its way. Rather than reflect on the tenets that were the foundation of its experience, Resident Evil 5 looked to the contemporary gaming zeitgeist in an attempt to find a new lease of life. The result is an unholy hybrid of Resident Evil, Gears of War, and Call of Duty. It's as ugly and unwieldy as it sounds.
Exactly, yeah, that was that weird era where Resident Evil was trying to compete with Call of Duty for whatever reason. It's like I said before, I'll say it again. Capcom, you easily have the better zombie game. Like, no question. No question. As much as I did enjoy the first Black Ops Zombies, like, it is nothing compared to Resident Evil, like, at all. That was weird era.
This design appears to not just be a misguided attempt to follow Western successes, but also a misreading of its predecessor. With Resident Evil 4, director Shinji Mikami deftly reinvented the series through the use of a new over-the-shoulder camera angle. The perspective allowed for a more kinetic, action-heavy game. Despite this, Mikami never lost sight of the terror at the core of Resident Evil.
True.
Through the use of enemies that were strategically placed to provide undulating waves of tension and fear, and the inclusion of...
I was literally about to say, when he said there's still a child, you're going to say, yeah, like the Regenerators. Then he showed one, like, yeah. The game was very action-packed, but was still very scary in places. Even the remake did it beautifully. And 5 and 6, I don't know what happened. Oh, wait, the Call of Duty, yeah.
Ashley as your vulnerable charge, combat encounters were focused on surviving overwhelming horrors rather than dominating foes. Resident Evil 5, meanwhile, presents its enemies as waves to be gunned down with increasingly powerful weaponry. Their purpose is cannon fodder, a wall of meat to slow your progress through levels, and those levels are not locations to be explored.
He literally just described Call of Duty zombies. He did.
Instead, they are largely funnels that push you from entrance to exit. Resident Evil 4 may have replaced the series' traditional continuous structure with discrete levels in an attempt to move away from the backtracking-heavy design of previous games, but it preserved the spirit of locations like the Raccoon City police station. The village, Salazar's castle, and the island feature interlocking, explorable pathways that solidify these locations as authentic spaces rather than obstacle courses. Resident Evil 5 has no interest in this, with the majority of its stages being little more than corridors peppered with dead ends to hide treasures in. Their lack of authenticity means no one will ever mention the Kajuju Autonomous Zone in the same breath as the Spencer Mansion.
Hell no.
All this is to say that a faithful remake of Resident Evil 5 would break Capcom's 7-year streak of brilliant survival horror games. It's telling that the series' reset point, Resident Evil 7, was a reinvention of the very first game, a haunted house that grew ever larger as you unlocked new rooms by solving its puzzles. Clever reinventions of this base conceit is the key to Resident Evil's success, be that dropping an unstoppable force into the house's corridors, such as Resident Evil 2's Mr. X, or expanding the scope of the house. Resident Evil Village's titular location is effectively a giant manor. Its corridors are streets, and its rooms are houses. Resident Evil 5's stage-driven structure is simply inferior to this design. A modern recreation of it would only further highlight its flaws, especially coming in such close proximity to masterclasses like the remake of Resident Evil 2. Remakes can, of course, completely redefine the structure of their source material. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, for example, is recognisably an updated version of the classic RPG, but its world design and gameplay mechanics are a world apart from the 1997 original, and so you could argue that Resident Evil 5 is actually the Resident Evil most in need of a remake. A whole new environmental structure and scenario design that reigns in the...
Nope, Code Veronica X, that's the one most in need of a remake. Like, easily. I mean, that fucking game is so hard. Fun, but hard. Like, literally, it would do so well today. Okay, like most people would say the only thing wrong with it is the visuals. I don't care about that. Like, hell, I even like the controls. Just, I'll take a remaster. I don't care. Like, that's what the most in need, I think.
Action and dials up the horror would bring it in line with Capcom's other remakes. But all of this doesn't account for Resident Evil 5's most notorious problem. Racism. Set in a fictional West African country, Resident Evil 5's primary antagonists are black people. Yes, it's technically the Ouroboros virus that protagonist Chris Redfield is fighting, but the parasite's host is depicted as a nation of mobs and primitives who are violent even before their infection. Intentionally or not,
he just kissed all the ass of Resident Evil 4, both versions, did he not? Oh, Les Plagas, that bug, it infected people who were not exactly white. They were in Spain. Those people were Spanish, man. Didn't say nothing there. I'm just saying.
Resident Evil 5 positions Africa as the Dark Continent, an uncivilized world harboring a diseased population that needs gunning down via Western intervention in the name of global security. This insensitive treatment of people of colour was hotly debated even as early as Resident Evil 5's debut trailer, with writers such as Ngai Cross.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Like, there was a controversy back then. Well, when the trailer came out, like, literally everybody was like, black zombies? What is this? And then you play the game and you're like, oh, they're in Africa. Well, that makes sense because, I gotta explain that, honestly. Like, if it was set in Asia, you fight primarily Asian zombies. Just like Resident Evil 4, you primarily fought Spanish zombies, okay? It's not racism.
and Stephen Totillo, pointing out the game's uncomfortable post-colonial imagery. The arguments and think pieces continued well into the game's release window, with IGN's own former editor-in-chief Hilary Goldstein having also wrestled with the subject. But that was 2009, a time when race was apparently a debate rather than a reality. In the 2020s, in a post-Black Lives Matter world, there is only one acceptable response to a white man shooting waves of Africans for an entire video game.
And what is that?
No.
There is one thing I do know. I have a job to do, and I'm gonna see it.
Mother. How appropriate.
Define their source material, but there's
I get a damn Call of Duty commercial in that timing. But since it's paused, I'll go ahead and say what I was gonna say. If this is such a big problem, just center it around Sheva. Chris made it like he is in like Resident Evil Village, maybe with a bit more of a presence. Like Sheva, the primary antagonist. Boom. To be so hung up on this. I mean, she's such a badass too. I love Chris. I do. Love Jill, my favorite character in the whole franchise, but a simple fix just around Sheva. If it's that big an issue. Set the black man.
I have a job to do, and I'm gonna see it through.
remakes may be able to redefine their source material, but there's only so many changes you can make until it's not a remake at all, but an entirely new game. And if you take Africa out of Resident Evil 5, is it Resident Evil 5 anymore? Even with a vastly improved, more sensitive take on the continent, perhaps one with a black protagonist and a more empathetic look at the outbreak, the experience would simply be too divorced from the original to hold the name Resident Evil 5. So where does Capcom go now? Personally, I'd look backwards. Code Veronica is an ideal candidate, as is the original Resident Evil. But
I literally just said that. An empathetic look. Are they empathetic in Raccoon City? Are they empathetic on that island in Code Veronica X? Are they empathetic in Resident Evil 4? Don't give me that shit. Come on now.
But if the only way is chronologically forward, then a total rewrite of what comes next is the logical path. Because what followed Resident Evil 4 was not one terrible game, but two. Resident Evil 6 doubled down, no, tripled down, on the action-packed, set-piece heavy shooter design, to the extent...
I'm glad that's where I paused, because Resident Evil 6 is basically the Fast and Furious game that's actually good, action-wise, that is, action-wise. Like, if there is a Fast and Furious game, it ain't that great. This is basically that, literally. Like, what was it, Furious 7 or all the shit, where the car goes from one building to another building to a third building. You do that in Resident Evil 6, the same thing. The exact same thing. Where Chris is driving with Pierce, I think it is. And yeah, it's the full-on, it's a solid action game, but a piss-poor survival horror game. Yeah. And it's just like, well, like 6 campaigns. And none of them were all that great. So I was like, well, Leon just actually, it is.
That much of it could be mistaken for a third-person Call of Duty spin-off were it not for the monsters. Its restrictive level design practically puts you in a chokehold, forcing you to endure a barrage of bombastic moments that have no interest in evoking any sense of fear.
And then that final battle that would not end. Admittedly, it was cool that he changed to a T-Rex. And he would not stay down, and he kept changing. It's like,
Resident Evil 6 is a survival horror, only in that it's a horrible game that you have to survive playing. But this time around, it doesn't have to be like that. Capcom now has the opportunity to ignore the past and completely reinvent this chunk of the timeline. In Resident Evil 4 Remake's post-credit scene, evil mastermind Albert Wesker details his plans for world domination to Ada Wong. Reflected in his glasses is an image of Excella Gion and the Stairway of the Sun, two significant plot elements from Resident Evil 5, which indicates Capcom's intentions. But there's more to consider. This scene is largely a replication of the sequence from Assignment Ada, a non-canon chapter from the original Resident Evil 4. Its shift from unofficial to canon points to a willingness to change. Furthermore, the end of this scene is completely rewritten. When learning of Wesker's plans, rather than dutifully deliver the stolen Las Plagas sample to him, Ada betrays her shadowy boss and forces her helicopter to turn around. In this moment, the future of Resident Evil becomes unclear. Capcom has given itself the freedom to do whatever it wants. I just hope it's not a remake of Resident Evil 5. Forces her helicopter to
I didn't realize that the same woman that played Ada Wong in this video game here in Assignment Ada is the same woman who played Ada Wong in Welcome to Raccoon City, the most recent movie, live action movie. I had no idea it was the same woman. So that's cool. Still, like, it's weird how the game got her cameo. How the game got her looking like Ada Wong with the movie. I was like, who was that again? She was like Ada Wong. I'm like, oh, that's who that. Really? Doesn't look like her, but okay. But they got her for the. And the woman actually does look like Ada Wong in actuality. So I don't know what in the wrong with Welcome to Raccoon City. I still defend that movie for the most part. Anyway, just thought I'd say that.
turn around. In this moment, the future of Resident Evil becomes unclear. Capcom has given itself the freedom to do whatever it wants. I just hope it's not a remake of Resident Evil 5. For more on how Capcom is altering the series, check out our video on the biggest changes in Resident Evil 4 Remake. And for everything else, stick with IGN.
Okay, look. I somewhat agree. Like, I'm not really interested in a remake of Resident Evil 5. I'll play it, but again, I really didn't care for that game too much. Like, my biggest problem wasn't the alleged racism. It was like everybody was a tentacle monster. It was Resident Evil the hentai. That's what it was. Like, literally, everybody was a giant tentacle monster with eyeballs you had to shoot and shit. And like, no variety in boss battles. And I'm one of those people who like my zombies traditional. I don't like my zombies shooting back at me, okay? Or driving shit. I don't like that. That's just me, though. Like, also, everything he said, the game, way too much on the action, the stories. It could have been great. They had a good idea there, taking place almost directly after the first game. They revisit the mansion and everything, even though it blew up. Maybe it got rebuilt. I don't know. Yeah, and just reintegrating Chris and Jill. I reference to the first game. I did dig that. There was a weird mystery woman who was obvious who she was. Like, I immediately was in the dark for like a brief second, but I was like, oh, I know who that is. Okay. And then it did not go the way I wanted to, but anyway. But yeah, no, I mean, the AI was ass. That can be fixed. I just, DLC to me was the best part of the whole of RE5. I mean, honestly, like 100%. I mean, like I said earlier, like he said, Code Veronica X, like give us that, or I don't know, Dino Crisis. Not the boys that called to give us last year, Exo Primal. That they come out and say, oh, it's not Dino Crisis. Yes, the same people worked on it. Yes, the protagonist is a woman with red hair. That's a name similar to the girl from Dino Crisis, but it's not Dino Crisis. Okay. As far as racism, I remember back then thinking that it was nonsense. This whole controversy was nonsense. I still think that now, okay? It's not racist. I explained it earlier. If you're in Africa primarily, yeah, you're gonna see black African people. Okay. Again, I find it funny you didn't bring up Resident Evil 4. Either one. You're shooting Spanish people. They're speaking Spanish. Like, this blonde hair, blue eyed Leon is shooting my. He didn't bring that up, but he brought it. Don't do my people favors, man. Do not. I mean, like I said, a simple fix, if it's this big a deal, which again, I don't think it is. Focus it around Seva. Chris can be there. But it's Seva. Like, there's a lot of her story unexplored anyway, so yeah. And then bring in Chris and Jill, the mystery woman. The Excelogy on it, yeah. But yeah, like, that's a simple fix. And no, not even got to change the whole game. Just swap them like the Power Rangers did. Yeah, yeah, don't care about the black zombies. In fact, I actually kind of liked them. They were kind of a challenge compared to like the regular zombies of the franchise. Okay, Again, they were shooting at me, throwing shit, just running up on me. I like those zombies. I did. Still prefer the classic ones, but still. Yeah. From what I hear, people have spoken on this already, and this was already like, yeah. I'm gonna read the comments now. So like, as a native Nigerian, hey, I'm of Nigerian descent myself. Y'all really gotta stop being so offended for us. Yes, like I said earlier, don't do us favors. Seriously. If we're offended, believe me, we'll let you know. Like we did with the movie Ted 2. Don't remake RE5, says the white man living in the UK. I mean, yeah. Whoever wrote this shouldn't be in journalism. That's a bit harsh. This game is not about killing people, it's about killing zombies. Oh my good, exactly, yeah. This is the dumbest thing I've seen today. The dude's been getting roasted a lot, yeah. Yeah, no, like, just don't be offended for us. That's extremely annoying. The game's not racist. Chris definitely damn sure ain't racist. Just swap him with Chef. Just swap the rope. That's all you do. Thank you for watching. And like, real reason to not remake Resident Evil 5. It ain't great. Too much action. AI's ass. Stories, eh. The DLC's heads and tails better. Like, the heads and tails better, which that's a problem. The bosses are bland. Too much tentacle porn shit. Not enough variety. It's too damn brown, but that's my personal taste. And the final battle is laughable. Laughable. All that build up. That's why RE5 shouldn't be remade. Not the racism nonsense. Thank you for watching.